Good evening, Miami. A happy election day, Coral Gables election. I'm happy to be here with Phil Prazen from NBC6.
Great to be here with you.
What's your official title?
An investigative reporter.
Investigative reporter.
But I focus in government, politics.
Yes, you're
policy.
Anyone that watches the show knows Phil well. We have him on a lot to talk about elections issues, and Phil got me off to a good start this morning because I spoke to him and said, "Happy Election Day," and he said, "Yeah, today's the day we do democracy."
Yeah.
So happy to be here. We're going to go right to it. We have Samantha Gross, Miami Herald political reporter, in the field, going to give us an update and a feel for what's happening out on the street. Samantha, how you doing?
Hi there. I'm doing well. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you perfect. We cannot see
Awesome.
you. I imagine that's probably on purpose.
Yes. I'm kind of hiding in a corner. But yeah, I'm here at Bay 13 Brewery in Coral Gables at Vince Lago's election night party. Been covering this election for a few months, and yeah, like Phil said, today's the day democracy is done. So it'll be an interesting night.
Democracy is a verb, not a noun.
That's a good one.
I like
it's it. Like Samantha, I'm curious. What's your day look like? I mean, you've been covering this day in and day out. You've been really digging into the Coral Gables election. Give me a day in the life. How has your election day been?
So today, I've really just been trying to, prep myself for tonight and catch up with voters. I've been going to polling locations a little bit in the latter part of the afternoon, and talking to the candidates and trying to kind of get them prepped to make sure that they pick up my calls tonight when I call them for a reaction as results come in. So just trying to get all my ducks in a row before polls close at 7.
I love hearing the how the sausage is made, is prepping for tonight. We're talking with Samantha Gross, Miami Herald reporter. I think most of us have reacted very positively to the in-depth coverage of the Coral Gables election by the Miami Herald. Is this more so than usual in your experience, focusing on this local election? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm new to covering local government at the Herald. I typically have focused on statewide races. So I think it's just been a really good opportunity to connect with the community and kind of hear things that they're concerned about, or things that they want to know from the people who are running to represent them on the dais. So I think that there's been a pretty good reaction. I know that sometimes the editorial board process is really closely watched by folks as well, obviously separate from the newsroom, but there's been a lot of interest in this election, so I've been glad to be able to have the time to dig into it.
Hey Samantha, it's Phil. I'm a huge fan, first of all, and I appreciate all your coverage. I just had a quick question on, since you've been out there today talking to voters, what have they been telling you? What are their driving issues? Are they coming to vote for any specific reason in Coral Gables?
Yeah, it's actually a question I've asked every voter. What are some of the issues that matter the most to you? A lot of them say development. I think a lot of them either live near big projects or drive near big projects, and it's a concern because obviously projects affect everyone with regards to traffic, noise, and it's something that a lot of people are really clued in on. That's definitely the biggest thing I've heard. People want traffic mitigation is kind of a typical answer, but makes sense. There's also been some concerns about, some public safety, some people who say that they wish that their streets were more patrolled by the Coral Gables police. But development and traffic are kind of the top issues. And also, when I ask, what they're voting for, a lot of them say so that the mailers will stop filling up my mailbox. So, that's kind of a joking answer, but I did hear it from multiple people today. So.
It's funny you say that, Samantha, because I had a chance to talk to a couple of candidates today, and there's definitely a feeling of, all right, win or lose, I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah. It's been an unprecedented amount. I did a little total today, and I found that I think about $139,000 was spent on mail among the 12 candidates in all 3 races this year. That's kind of an estimate because obviously, some consulting money can go toward mailers, but That's a lot of mail for a town like Coral Gables.
Well, we're going to let you go and get on with your Vince Lago party. I have one quick question for you. What do you think of kind of these off-cycle elections? You know, it's interesting from my perspective because we're here and we're talking about one thing, Coral Gables elections, and I kind of like it. But there's been talk in the past that dampens participation. Doesn't seem by some of your reporting today that participation has been dampened.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are interested. Those are the people who are plugged in. But, you know, this is a place where over 30,000 people are registered to vote. And, you know, so far the totals have been much less than that. I think that last year the grand total ended up being around 8,000 voters. So we'll see, you know, how turnout looks. You know, it could be interesting. I think, you know, in an off year, obviously, people aren't going to the polls to vote for president. So it's, or, you know, some of the other big issues. So that could be dampened a little bit. But I think the people who are plugged in and who have been listening, you know, are certainly turning out to vote.
Well, perfect.
That's an interesting topic to go into, though, especially because the argument for having it all of the races in the same every 2 years is probably just, it's easier to do. You can match up all the candidates, you can match up all the paperwork, but you kind of lose those local issues like community development, which specific projects are going to be built when and how. But you know, the argument to keep them there, I've been told by a couple people with off year people who are on the ballot in the off years, is it gets the partisanship out of it.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's funny. And Samantha, we're going to let you go, but I'll come back to you, Phil, with that. But on that, Samantha, like, do you think that, have you noticed, is this election surprised you that it's been more partisan or less partisan?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that today there is, you know, people tend to kind of look at things in a partisan light. I talked to a voter yesterday who said, you know, no matter what election, he votes Republican. Even in a nonpartisan race, you know, he does his research and he votes for the people who he thinks, you know, he agrees with ideologically. So I don't think it surprises me that people feel that way. You know, but it is interesting in a nonpartisan race how partisan politics tend to play out. But it certainly, you know, attracts the attention of some voters who vote that way.
How much have the campaigns been leading into that? I mean, has there been a lot of campaign messaging about I'm the Democrat, I'm the Republican, etc.?
You know, there hasn't been, but I've seen some texts. So I don't live in Coral Gables, so I don't get every text and every mailer. But I've gotten, you know, some texts that were sent by you know, prominent Republicans, by prominent Democrats endorsing some of these candidates. So while the candidates aren't necessarily coming out and saying, you know, you should vote for me, I'm a Democrat, because it is a nonpartisan race, you can kind of tell by the people who are doing their speaking, you know, who's supporting whom. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And, you know, some of the voters I've talked to say, you know, maybe they're Democrat and their spouse is Republican, and they are getting very different types of mail. So that's another way to kind of parse that. I think, you know, it's certainly a targeted approach.
Well, great, Samantha. We know you got work to do. We really appreciate you making time and giving us your perspective. And we are big fans and look forward to reading your column tomorrow as you break it all down.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Have a good election night.
Enjoy. You too.
Thanks, you too.
We're going to go live now to Ariel Fernandez at Gables Insider. And I love getting the different perspectives, you know, looking at this from each of the different things. And Samantha's perspective was you know, she's been following it, and she's been following it kind of big issue after big issue, right? There's been a lot of controversy on the development side. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I have two questions on that because you've been here longer than I have. Are the development issues front and center more this year than you think in the past?
You know, I will answer that. Let's bring in Ariel. And we're going to put Ariel right on the spot. First of all, Ariel, where are you, man? You look good. I love that Gables view behind you. Can you hear us, Ariel? Ariel, we can't. Sorry, bear with us, everyone. We're trying to get Ariel. I don't think he can hear us either. Want to just come back and text? Go ahead and send him a text. Ariel, we're gonna cut you off and bring you back on. I do think that the development issue has been more, but development's been an issue in the Gables for a long time. And Gables is kind of a different animal as far as the attitude toward development. And I think that there was a all right, let me just text. I'm just texting Ariel.
Yeah.
Try again. They kind of blew the lid off and said, we got to develop something. Okay, Ariel's back on. He's grayed out. Ariel, can you hear us?
Nothing.
What a bummer. It's like he can't hear us and we can't hear him.
Yeah, it seemed like it was on his end, though. Very bad. Let's try.
Ariel, can you hear us? Does he need to take off those speakers, maybe? Take off headphones. We can sure hear those. We can hear his birds in the background. Yes, Ariel.
I can hear you now. Perfect.
All right, perfect. We can hear your birds in the background.
Yeah, there's some birds out here. It's Coral Gables.
I love it. We're on with Ariel Fernandez from Gables Insider, and we're here with Phil Prazen here in the studio. So where are you?
I'm here in downtown Coral Gables, off of Alhambra, waiting for the results to come in. About 7:15, we should get the first wave of results. I just got off the phone with the city clerk. The last report that he received from Department of Elections showed that we had over 1,800 votes up 4 o'clock today. So that means we've already exceeded the number of votes in the 2019 election. We've had over 9,000 votes this election as of 4 o'clock today. And there was a steady stream of voters coming to the polls after 4 p.m. today after work.
What do you attribute the well, first of all, it seems higher turnout. It seems people are very passionate. What do you think is driving that this year?
Well, I think some of those numbers that we're seeing, David, are also related to the vote by mail ballots that were mailed out to voters. If you count the election day votes and the votes in early voting, you have just about as many people as the ones who voted on election day last election. Remember, Coral Gables did not do early voting before. This is the first time we do it here. We did 2 days. And we have seen about 4,000 people come out to vote when all is said and done on early voting on election day. But as far as vote by mail ballots, we had about 4,500 last time. This time we've seen about 5,600 to 5,700 ballots returned out of about 13, almost 14,000 that were sent out.
Tell me, tell us a little bit about how would you describe the Gables Insider? It's a newsletter, but it's more than a newsletter.
We are a newsletter, and we try to keep things brief but informative. Our goal is to keep voters and residents in the city of Coral Gables informed as to what's taking place at City Hall and throughout the city. We've recently expanded to a little bit of UM sports as well. We're covering UM baseball. We have a reporter who is constantly there at the games in person and bringing us the live feed from there as to what's going on. But our goal has always been to keep people informed and fill a void that was left when the Miami Herald no longer had a reporter in Coral Gables and didn't have a constant reporting out of City Hall, just to make sure voters and residents in the Gables know what's going on and are informed.
Hey, Ariel, this is Phil. Great to talk to you. Compare this to years past. I mean, when it comes to matchups in these elections, is this year more competitive in Coral Gables than in the years past?
Well, I think what we saw here is you had 3 open seats. This is the first time in Coral Gables, at least last 10 or 12 years, where there's actually been 3 open seats in Coral Gables elections. You had Pat Guion running for mayor, Vince Lago running for mayor, so both their seats were open, and Raul Valdez-Fowley, who was retiring. So it was definitely a new crop of candidates who were running for the commission races. You had a lot of new names in there. And you definitely had interest in people and trying to decide what direction they want the city of Coral Gables going in. We saw the motivation with the zoning changes on Miracle Mile and development as a whole. I mean, these buildings that you see behind me here are the root of why people have started participating more in elections here in Coral Gables, because they have really been happy with the direction this has been going in.
And we were talking about that just before you popped in.
Hey, Tommy,
is that how long has that been an issue front and center? I mean, has development always been around as an issue, or when did it start to be the issue?
Well, I think development has been around at least for the last 20 years. Coral Gables has been in a rapid growth, especially in the downtown area, and developers have been buying out properties in residential neighborhoods as well. I was a candidate for Coral Gables Commission in 2015, and development was the #1 issue back in 2015. So over the last 6 years, we've just seen more interest from residents on this topic. And it's a topic that really leads to other things as well. I mean, Coral Gables has a large traffic issue, and development obviously brings more traffic. We're a cut-through city. Those of us who were out at the Coral Gables Country Club today, where people were voting, you could see the amount of non-Gables residents who were just driving through past the golf course and past the country club, because that's their way home. And that's something that, as a city, residents are concerned about it. The question is, what is the commission going to do about it? And we'll see what the new commissioners who come in decide to do to tackle this issue.
Well, exciting stuff. I got to tell you, it's been, you mentioned the Miami Herald, and right before you came on, we had Samantha Gross on. You'll see her at Vince Lago's party at the place. And, you know, I got to tell you, I, for one, am so happy to see the increased coverage, you know, like to see the Herald back interested. I don't know if it was the big issues that drove it. When we asked Samantha, she just said it's interesting as hell. This is an interesting election.
There's stuff to talk about.
Yeah, you know that it is. And so appreciate what you do. Appreciate what you do getting that hyper local coverage. I've been thinking a lot about you today. Like today, I was at the county commission, and it had to do with West Matheson Park, which impacts a little bit of the Gable stuff. And a couple of the commissioners were saying, you know, Commissioner Raquel Regalado, who covers a lot of the Gables, said she had to get a new cell phone today. And because residents are calling her so much, upset about a proposed closure of the park. And it was interesting to hear like the participation and the relationship between elected officials and their constituents. And I was actually thinking about your site as a forum for resolution of that a little bit. You see, like you offer up a forum where residents are complaining, they're talking, they're interacting. And I think that it's like, you know, it takes a lot of work to provide that type of forum for people to exchange views. And I think as a lawyer, it's like the competition of ideas. And I appreciate what you do, and I want to thank you for it. And if anyone hasn't subscribed, I think everyone in the Gables is subscribed to your you've been growing like crazy, I think, for that reason. But thank you for all you do, and thank you for making that available. It's like, you know, to kind of riff on something we've been talking with Phil, it's like more democracy, please.
And I think we've definitely had a lot of dialogue on some of the more controversial topics, and the comments and the discussion that people have fostered. And some of those have gotten to the commissioners, and they have brought about real change. The zoning changes on Miracle Mile, in particular, they were toned down. And I think that Gables Insider and the community that started chiming in based on the articles that we put out and the information that was sent to us, it actually did bring about a scaled down zoning change to what was originally proposed.
That's great. I don't know if you're interested in giving us any predictions for tonight.
I think we'll have a mayor-elect tonight. As far as commission races, I think we will know who's going to a runoff. I think In these races where you have so many candidates, it's difficult to avoid a runoff. So I think April 27th is the next big day. And I think the biggest thing that Coral Gables is going to have to do is remember, you need to participate again on April 27th. The numbers in the past for runoffs have been dismal. And it's important that we voiced our opinion today, but today is not the only day. We have to go back in 2 weeks and voice our opinion in the runoff.
Fantastic. Last question for you is, we were talking with Samantha about kind of the off-cycle election and the pluses and minuses. In your mind, is this a good thing? Is it good that we're doing this on Tuesday, April 13th? Is it today the 13th? Is this good that we're doing this instead of in November?
I can see the arguments for keeping it here, and I can see the arguments for moving it. If you're asking my personal opinion, I think this election would fit in the August election. You have a similar turnout, maybe another 3,000 or 4,000 people who vote in that election. But people at this point are just electioned out. November took a real toll on people, all the negative attacks, the mailers, the phone calls. Now, I'll be honest, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, people haven't been answering their doors, they haven't been answering their phones, and they've really been throwing those mailers out. So we've gotten to a point where people have already made up their minds, and it might be a good time to move this election to a point in time where people are already engaged and they're going to go out to the polls. There's an additional cost to the city as well. The city does have to pay for this election, extra for this election, so it might be a good time to make that change.
And South Miami just did it, for that very reason. South Miami bucked the trend. I think we have this one. We have Sweetwater coming up. I mean, there's a few oddities, but it seems like the strong trend is to move to a regular cycle election.
I think election administrators just find it easier. The people who actually have to put these things on probably prefer it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you look at what happened here in Coral Gables, the vote by mail ballots actually went out a week before they were supposed to. Not even the city was informed that the vote by mail ballots were sent out. In fact, I got my printout of the mail that was coming in. I sent a picture of it to the clerk, and that's how he found out the vote by mail ballots had already been sent out. Department of Elections sent them out a week early because there were other elections, and they decided to send them all out at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we look forward to we'll try to check in with you later. Have a good election night. Appreciate your time, Ariel, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you. And thank you guys for what you're doing, and community newspapers for being such a great role model in this community and bringing the information to us for over 50 years.
Thank you, sir.
That's an interesting topic, though, about, as quote unquote mainstream journalism. I think it's more nationalized. That's a trend that's going on in a lot of aspects of American society, right? Our politics is national.
Our eating habits are exactly.
Well,
sports radio is going national.
Our media consumption is national, and there's an economic side effect of that when it comes to layoffs and downsizing at a lot of these local papers that are for profit, right? It will be interesting to see how many of these models pop up, like the Gables Insider, and here this is a great hyper local publication. But I wonder if there's going to be more coming.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a
South
perfect
Florida.
time to bring in one of my favorite people, Elaine DeValle. Will you drop her in, Tommy?
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Here with Phil Praise and Elaine DeValle, Political Cortadito. If you don't read it, you're missing out. Elaine is one of the best writers that I know. Very good at synthesizing the information and getting it in a quick, readable. I hope this doesn't offend you, and amusing and entertaining fashion. Welcome,
No offense
Elaine.
taken at all. I find local politics very amusing and entertaining, so I thought everybody else should too.
I love it. Elaine, you heard Phil talk about it. I will quote somebody else who's not here today, who is Al Crespo, who retired, who another political blogger, some would say reporter also. And he would often say, Elaine, I shouldn't exist. My column shouldn't exist. I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. If media did their job, I wouldn't exist. And it was an interesting take because you come from a journalism background and you should exist. I think that you can say things and take positions that maybe a mainstream outlet can't take. You're more agile, you're more provocative.
I can ask questions that I don't have the answers to. I mean, I worked at the Miami Herald for 18 years, and I remember one of the things that was very frustrating was that we couldn't ask a question in the story if we didn't have the answer to it. And that can really tie your hands when you don't have the answers. I think that blogging has been very liberating to me because I can do that. And I think there's room for both. I mean, I think that there's a role for mainstream media, and there's a role for micro community bloggers who and watchdog journalists like myself who bring stuff up from the very micro level. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that Al Crespo or I or Stephanie from up north from Voter Focus have broken a story that the Miami Herald or a local TV channel have later followed better, and because they have more resources, been able to do more with. But I think that we serve kind of like a junior varsity team to them, and we can serve them up some stories because we're on the ground and we have people on the ground, and they're giant conglomerates that are they're better at the big regional stories and better at in-depth. But I think that we're more the local bloggers are more on the day-to-day in touch with the people on the ground.
It's go ahead.
No, I think that's super accurate. When you think about like where I work, our media market is Monroe, Miami-Dade, and Broward counties, right? It's a huge,
lots of news.
8 million people or
and
so
you guys
live
cover
there.
and you guys cover everything, right?
and
everything.
And we're all over the region. Political nerds like me would love to go and cover every single City of Miami commission meeting, but the staffing just isn't there. Yeah. And a lot of times not much happens at the City of Miami commission meetings, but then sometimes it does, it does
Things
become
that are
a
very
huge
impactful
story.
Do happen, yeah.
And we read Politico Cortadito, Al Crespo, Florida Bulldog. I mean, we read all of these blogs to see because they're there.
It's like part of the ecosystem.
It is, and
to be well informed, you almost have to like kind of read all of it.
And it's a hyper local niche market that is good. I mean, Elaine's great at it.
Yeah, Elaine, you are.
Thank you.
We're gonna have a love fest with you here because everyone we're all big fans of yours.
Well, it's no secret. It's just I worked at the Miami Herald for almost 2 decades, and as you know, Phil, you build a Rolodex. Oh my God, now my age is showing. You build a list of sources. Your contact list on your phone gets very long. I have more than 3,000 contacts on my phone, so I couldn't ignore the tips when they came. I would give them to the Herald or give them to some friend of mine who was in mainstream media. But as Phil said, they're busy covering bigger stories for their entire wide audience, and some of these micro stories are only important to the people in those communities. So I'm happy to continue doing what I've always loved to do. So anyway.
On that note, we want some predictions. Could you start with the mayor's race? There's been a lot of this reminds me of I remember in law school, Elaine, you'd sit down and one of the jokes I would play is you'd get the fact, you'd get the fact scenario from the professor. And so, here's one of the smartest human beings you've ever seen who's a great writer. And he'll write basically a short story that's it's so full of issues and legal problems, and that's on purpose, right? And you have to kind of unpack the problem and come up with solutions. And I would always read this like page long thing. And I would, look at my buddy. I'd be, psst, 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 Bobby. And finally he'd look up annoyed and be like, I don't see any issues here. So that's how I feel about this election. Like, there's nothing to talk about, right? There's nothing controversial going on in the Gables, right, Elaine?
Oh yeah, no, nothing at all. I think that especially in the last couple of weeks, it's become kind of like a very polemic battle in the mayoral race. If I would have to make any not recommendations but predictions, I think that Vince Lago had a very secure lead before the Miami Herald withdrew its endorsement and the news came out about the letter that he signed for Carrollton School. From what I understand, the polls had him leading in double digits. I don't know that this news, that this scandal is going to have much of an effect. First, it came after already 6,800 people or 5,600 people had voted absentee. Secondly, the people who are upset about that letter are people who probably were going to vote for Pat Keon anyway. And sorry, I should have turned that off. And the people who are going to vote for Vince Lago aren't going to be concerned about that letter. But also, I think that people, at least that I've heard, are more upset about the number of dark money mailers or mystery money mailers that have come out against Vince Lago, attacking him as a pro-development candidate when everybody knows that's not the case. And I think in Coral Gables, that's happened a few times in the past. In the last couple of elections, we've had these mystery mailers from PACs that nobody's ever heard of. But I think that this has been the most they've ever seen. And what people have told me that to them is more important than a letter that Vince signed for the school where his kids go. So I still think Vince pulls it out. There might be a runoff only because there's a third candidate. And remember, in 2019, Raul Valdez-Valley won by 126 votes. So the mayoral race can come down to less than 200 votes for the winner. And, it could go into the runoff because there's a third candidate in this race. But I still expect Lago to pull it out. We'll see at the end of the night if I'm right or not.
Before you leave that race, we're going to have Rip Holmes on.
Okay.
And it's
Third
interesting,
candidate.
He's the third candidate, and he has been, I think that he will probably do better than he's done in the last elections. I think there's a certain amount of
he's
people,
ever done. Absolutely.
and it'll be interesting to see. Like he's like the most important man right now in that race because it's like comes down to what he pulls away, and there are some people that may just say like, these two candidates are too mainstream and I'm going to go ahead and try this. On the, so we had earlier Ariel Fernandez on, and his prediction was we will have a mayor elect tonight. So I tend to disagree. I think that Rip's going to pull away enough votes that we are going to have a runoff. So.
Well, they're very close elections. 2019, Raul Valdez-Valley won by 126, like I said. In 2017, he won by 180 something. So, they're close elections. It's very likely that it's very possible that there could be a runoff.
Tell us about the Group 2.
Group 2 is the cluster bunch. That's where all 6 candidates are. I mean, I had really, really hoped that somebody from that group would move to Group 3, where I think it's a desert of candidates. There's a lot of good candidates in Group 2. I think there's going to be a runoff between Rhonda Anderson, who's going to pull. Let's call it how it is. She's going to pull the Anglo vote and divide, and the other candidates, Claudia Miro, Tania Cruz Jimenez, Jose Valdez-Valley, are going to divide the Hispanic vote. I think it's going to be a runoff between Rhonda Anderson and Tania Cruz Jimenez, actually, because I think that she's worked harder, in my opinion, than Jose Valdez-Valley, who has really relied on his name recognition more than anything else. And she has that machinery. She was out there today. I don't know if you saw the photos on Instagram with her mother-in-law and her father-in-law, who's the congressman, used to be a mayor, and also before he was the Miami-Dade mayor, was the commissioner in that district that covered Coral Gables. So they have a long history with the voting establishment and the voting machinery in that area. So I think she's going to do a lot better than people expected. In the Group 3 race, I think that it's going to be a runoff between Alex Bucello and Kirk Menendez. I just think that Kirk has gotten a lot of momentum in the last few weeks, and he's Mr. Coral Gables. Any other year, Kirk would have won, with 80% of the vote. This year, he's hurt by his position on the development and the rezoning of the craft section where he owns property, and he was in favor of that. But I don't think that that's enough. I think that the only people who are against that are just the people who live right around the craft section. I think that the rest of the city sees that area as a buffer zone, and they agree with the rezoning. So I think that he's gonna pull it out. And I don't think that Javier Baños is, even though he's well funded, I don't think that he is connecting with Gables voters the way that he should be.
Elaine, do you think, when it comes to Cruz Jimenez, do you think that the Congressman Jimenez has been an aspect in this race publicly, or is it more just kind of the logistics and the staffing behind the scenes, or has he been out campaigning for her?
He hasn't been out campaigning for her that I've seen until today. I have seen her walking with her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law did an advertisement in Spanish radio for her. And I think that he has been definitely privately helping. I think that he helps with the fundraising. I think that he helped get her get the firefighters endorsement. And I think that I think he's hurt her too in Coral Gables. I know for a fact because I know people whose doors she's knocked on that have closed the door on her because she's Carlos Jimenez's daughter or daughter-in-law. But you know, if she gets a chance to explain herself, she's far different from him. I think she's the black sheep of the Jimenez family, and you know, it's gonna hurt her, I think, with some votes, but I think it's gonna help her with other votes. So it's a wash.
I think it's a great analysis. So we're gonna please hold on because we're gonna have you come on about 7:15 when we start getting some results in, and we'll go over those together. So we'll be back, Elaine. Thank you so much.
I'll be here. Thank you.
And 7:15 is when they start populating.
We'll see when Tommy will. And Tommy, I forgot to tell Elaine that your fact checker Tommy is calling for the runoff with Tanya in there also, Rhonda and Tommy. We're going to go now to what many people think may be the spoiler in the run for mayor, Rip Holmes. Rip, how you doing?
Well, isn't that nice to be included? That's very nice of you. I really appreciate it. That was
Rip.
a fascinating conversation that I got to hear from you, the previous one with Elaine de Valle.
I want to hear your thoughts. First of all, you're enjoying this, Rip. You've run a good campaign. I can see by your energy that you're having fun. I think your voice is being heard out there.
Well, let's hope so. You know that getting the word out is so important, and I've only been able to loan myself $4,000. I think my opponents have $800,000 or $500,000 respectively. It's all, most of it probably developer money. However, so I don't know if you two can laugh about this. I have gotten no respect with the Miami Herald. I've gone from the lowest to the highest. Did you know that the new publisher is Nancy Meyer? She's actually a nice person, but she's from out of town. So she said, Rip, I can't get them to cover the central issue of my campaign, which is that the new zoning code that is law now is a blueprint for the end of Coral Gables as a suburb. And I keep saying to the Miami Herald, this is news. And they said, well, maybe, but we're not going to cover it. We think that you're delusional. And what do you do when you realize your name is Rodney Dangerfield? So the funny part, though, is that in the past 2 days, because I'm fluent in Spanish, hablo fluido el español después de 25 años de aprendizaje, the Spanish language TV stations have been covering me for the past 2 days. So I'm really, I don't know if that's funny or not, but if I'm getting respect from TV, at least I'm not Rodney Dangerfield anymore.
There you go. And we're here with NBC6 reporter Phil Praise, and he's glad to hear that.
Yeah, and we actually, because NBC6 is also Telemundo 51, we talked to all the candidates today, including Rip. And Rip is the only person who reached out to me personally on social media and sent me a video about why he's running and what's important to him. And, so the energy is there. Rip, let me ask you, what your whole idea of, Coral Gables being or should be a suburb and should be, continue those policies. I just moved to Florida, to South Florida here about a little more than a year ago. And when I think of Coral Gables, I just see it one city turns into the next city, turns into the next city, turns into the next city. There's not much of a difference you notice driving through all the cities. So, I mean, is it too little too late on that issue? You're already part of the megapolis.
Well, and you're hitting it. See, now you're what the Miami Herald isn't. You're talking reality here. The Miami Herald, if you can believe this, was saying, Rip, Coral Gables is a suburb now. It will always be a suburb. There's no possibility that it could be otherwise. I got that from Dave Wilson, one of the editors, right? Can you believe that? And whereas what you just articulated is the reality. And I had to send him a couple of videos trying to wake him up. But the Miami Herald it would tell you that you're as delusional as I am. And this is actually an insult, right? And the thing is, I care, and I think the voters care, and if we look at the turnout now, and I don't mean to be a dog with a bone here, but if the Miami Herald had done its job, they came out of bankruptcy. That's why they didn't do a job. So they are too weak. They've lost their moral strength, and they're not doing their job. So, but if they had, I think that the turnout would have been significantly higher. I think we would have had 2,000 to 5,000 more votes, because what is the reality here? It's what you just said, Mr. Let's see if I get your name correctly. Praisen.
Praisen.
Help me.
Praisen.
Like
Praisen,
raisin with a P.
right? Yeah. Yeah, I missed it by a couple of vowels or a couple of letters. I should have gone with a Z, and I went with a V. So, good name. Anyway, so here it is. Isn't that interesting? You're fairly new to town, and you know more than the Miami Herald, who's telling me I'm delusional. All right, now, and if they had done what you just did, which is to say, hey, listen, this doesn't look that much like a suburb. Maybe we better be concerned if that's what we want to keep. Then I think we would have had a higher turnout. And then we get back to the. Go ahead.
Well, let me interrupt you on that. It's so interesting, that perspective you bring, because one of the reactions I had was you were discounted as a candidate by the Herald, and kind of my takeaway, the main reason was you had not raised a lot of money. And you and I spoke about that afterwards, but like my immediate reaction was like, maybe in this election that's a positive. Like, I was really surprised how it was like, okay, it almost begs a bigger question. It's like, if you can't bring the big developer money, you therefore are not a serious candidate.
But is that just the Coral? That's not just the Coral Gables thing. Seems to be a South Florida conversation.
Maybe I know it's news to me. Like, I don't know. I mean, it seems like maybe the next candidate needs to, really.
All right. So let me tell you my secret here, okay? Because I don't know about you, but when someone tells you that me and Mr. Praisen are delusional with our description of Coral Gables ending as a suburb, that really gets to me. Now, let me ask both of you, Mr. Praisen, you especially. Do you know who Antonio Melchiorre is?
No.
He's the guy that with a stroke of a pen can liquidate. He owns the Miami Herald, and he was originally intending possibly to liquidate it, and I've asked him to go ahead and do it. So they think that I'm delusional. Well, now they're going to have to explain maybe to the person who can, with one stroke of a pen, can cease their existence. Because that's what they're doing to Coral Gables. That's what they're doing to Coral Gables. I don't take it lightly. When I was born here in Coral Gables, when my grandfather was an acquaintance of George Merrick, and George Merrick, the founder of Coral Gables, took him to Miracle Mile at my grandfather's request. He says, I want to buy some property on Miracle Mile. Show me what to buy. And the founder of Coral Gables said, buy this property. This is going to be valuable property back in 1930. And the Miami Herald says, yeah, you're delusional that Coral Gables could end as a suburb. Okay, so I related all this to Antonio Melchiorre, who owns 100% or 60% or whatever. He is the decider as to whether the Miami Herald should be liquidated and its assets be sold. So we'll see, whether I get any traction on that. But I sent them that video on Twitter 2 days ago.
Well, Rip, we're going to come back to you if I'd like for you to stick by, because as the results come up, I'd like to come back to you and talk with you. We've got a Coral Gables voter here in the studio. We're going to go with her, and then we get the results. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Y'all are great.
Thank you.
Y'all are great.
Come on in. We get a chance. No, you know what? I'm going to give you my chair. Well, you know what? Actually, yeah, Phil. Let's kick Phil out for a second.
I'm out.
Cecile. No. So we have
Cecile Melanie. Good evening.
Well, I was going to say, I know, Cecile, you've been here before.
Yes.
We're so glad to have you back. Okay. You know what? Let's go ahead and so did you vote today or did you vote earlier?
I vote by ballot, absentee ballot.
You did
yes.
absentee. And I'd like to ask what you're and we know each other from you're here with your daughter with her sunset mask on. We know each other from sunset. My daughter was here earlier. What grade is your daughter in?
I miss you. She's in 3rd grade.
In 1st grade.
Third. And
we're
yours?
We're in 2nd grade. In the French program?
Yes.
We're in the Spanish program. Bonjour. ¿Cómo ça va? We know each other from the Wawa.
Exactly.
Tell me, what are your predictions for this election?
Prediction, it's hard for me to predict. I think definitely Vince Lago is going to eventually become the mayor. You know, it may be one of the most popular vote in general. It was a tough decision on mayoral candidate because for me there was no ideal. You know, my opinion sometimes because we think as a family, as issue, there's a development. We definitely look for people who are against like overdeveloping Coral Gables for sure. But it's true, to our heart is a Wawa gas station. And it's not that we wanted to make the focus, but we are looking at the candidate who like thinking that it can be reversed or something can be done. And we're listening to us. And I think if you have an attitude like, some parents say about Pat Keon. I wasn't there, but she was kind of like dismissing totally parents
The
through
concerns.
email, and then we like the privileged parents, and we are a lot of parents that go to Sunset and then go to Carver, but we are also Coral Gables residents. And Coral Gables is beautiful. I work here since '93. I've been in Miami since '89. And it's true. I mean, at some point there was not enough residential apartment in the Gables, but now it's getting crazy. And I'm really worried. I think it's going to take us a longer time. And we're on Douglas and Minoka. When she gets to Carver, it's going to take us longer than to go to Sunset in South Miami. And Coral Gables is still beautiful. I always been like come here for a long time. I live in Miami Beach. I've seen what the damage were done in Miami Beach. I don't want to see that. And I agree with Rip what he say. It's true that there's not enough coverage about this in general. And so I want for the commissioner, like the best one to help us, because the mayor is important, but you have also the vote depend on the commission, and to stop like this Americanized nonsense, craziness, and millions of dollars wasted. And that's about it. You know?
Well,
but I want also,
Yeah.
more people to vote. You know, I
Yes.
realized for many years, I came when I was 22. I was a foreign student, then I got an H1, then I got a green card, and I couldn't vote. And for a while, I was not really into voting for the mayor. But I think now also as parents with a child,
Teaching, yeah.
you know, late in life, but with a child, I wanna show her that it matters, and to get more parents involved. I mean, yes, to have a higher percentage of voting.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate you stopping by and bringing by. And Phil was saying earlier about we're doing democracy today.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you taking the
Thank you
time,
for doing
and
that.
we're going to do a follow-up show about the Wawa, kind of in the context of this election. You and I.
Okay.
That was a popular show that brought in. So we will have you back, and thank you for stopping by.
Thank you so much for doing that. Okay.
You
Bye-bye.
got it. We're gonna mute Rip and bring up the results, right?
Got him right here.
Here we go. Everybody, we got some breaking news. We're seeing the absentee results for the first time now. So what we're looking at here in the mayoral race, we've got Vince Lago. So we got 7,400 votes in. Vince Lago at 67%. Pat Keon at 38%, and Rip at almost 5%. So if that holds, we're gonna have a mayor elect. As predicted, well,
Look at look at group 2.
Yeah. So on group,
You still see that, or you want me to-
no, you got to go bigger. On group 2, big news on it looks like Rhonda Anderson close to a majority. She's got 43%. Second place, distant second is Jose Valdez Valley. And as we predicted, Tanya with 13%. And then you have Claudia with 7.6, Myro with 7, and Alex Hack at 1.82. Group 3 is neck and neck with Javier Baños, 31%. Some people, he did better than I think people thought. And neck and neck with Kirk Menendez at 31.
So Cruz Jimenez is a surprise, I think, for a lot of folks, being
strong,
a distant third.
Well, yeah, she said that she was out. Yeah,
Cruz Jimenez. I mean, that's
it goes against. We're gonna bring. Let's go ahead and bring Elaine in. Elaine, give us your thoughts so far. We can't hear you. Oh, it's our fault. Hang on.
Okay.
Start again.
That was you. Okay. Yeah. No. It might be surprising to some. I thought Tanya was going to be in the runoff only because she was working so hard. But the polls,
the results.
The polls have shown her in third place. And so this is turning out to be like the polls. The interesting surprise in group 3 is that the runoff will be between Baños and Kirk Menendez. That I knew Kirk was a lot of momentum, but I'm surprised that Alex hasn't done better. And that's a pretty large margin for him to make up with absentee ballots and voting. So we'll see.
Yeah, so let's be clear. So we've got 7,000 voters in. So it's going to be, as you know, I don't know if you have different numbers, but Ariel said we're going to have over 9,000, a little over 9,000 total. So that's really not going to be enough to move the needle on much anything, you know, from here. Like you said, it's going to be hard for Alex to make up that difference. Yeah, I don't think there's enough votes in any of these. And I think what that means is that we have a mayor-elect. I don't think those votes would get. I don't know that. Yeah, it looks like Vince is going to pull it off.
You don't think Pat Keon has enough gas in the tank to come back?
What
was her day of? You know.
Yeah, but it's just
ground game.
Day of, but just we're looking at 2,000 more votes. It just won't.
Yeah, she would have to get all the votes today in order to win. We're going to a runoff.
And do you feel like that's a bigger lead for Vince Lago than expected? 57 is pretty big.
Yeah, 60. Yeah. Well, when I heard about the polling had 20
57.
So this is what 24 points or 19 points ahead. So it sounds like the polling was spot on.
The polling was spot on in the mayoral race, and then it's interesting. It's very interesting to me that Myra and Claudia are neck and neck, you know, with the same. Alex never caught on. What happened?
His family and his neighbors voted for him. That's it.
132 votes. It's a big family.
And my neighbors.
Yeah.
Tell me about who wins then. I mean, I got to tell you something. If, you know, Rhonda's going to be close. Rhonda may pull that. Rhonda, I guess she can't quite get there. I mean, again, with 2,000 votes left, could she get over it? If she's going to be close to an outright win. But if you add up, like if you give Tanya's votes to Valdez Valley, Rhonda's going to be a strong. It's going to be tough to beat in that runoff, Elaine.
Rhonda comes out of this first round in a very strong position. Almost winning it outright. I mean, you know, like you said, we'll have to see what votes she gets on election day. I do expect her to do well today. So we have to see, but she's going to hold on to that or grow, and that's going to put a very strong position for the final.
Who wins in the runoff between Alex and Kirk? Between Baños and Kirk Menendez.
Like I said earlier, I think Kirk would have taken it all in the first round if it hadn't been for the development issue, which I think people are beginning to see the nuances in. I think Kirk can take it. You know, I believe that Kirk Menendez. If everybody who has ever learned soccer from Kirk Menendez at the youth center, from Coach Menendez, voted for him, then I think he wins.
It's interesting. I will give you some pushback on that because, like, you know, we just had a voter that I know from school, from Sunset Elementary, who's active in opposition, Gables resident who's active in the opposition to the Wawa. And, you know, Kirk Menendez is, is perceived, he wouldn't participate. He didn't participate in the debate because I think he's pretty pro Wawa. And so I think that it'll be interesting to see because Banos has definitely been saying the right things on a number of those issues. And I think that's going to be a real dogfight. I think Banos did better than we thought he was going to do.
Much better. I think that though is a reflection of the fact that he's been campaigning the longest of any of these people. He's been campaigning for over a year. So I think that hard work has paid off in this way.
It's interesting you say that because that's one thing that Al Crespo would always say. It's like when people would talk about running, you know, he was always skeptical of their ability, that it's hard to run, right? Mm-hmm. It's a hard thing to do. And he would always talk about, like, you're going to have to knock on every door. Like, are you prepared to do that? That means every night, every weekend, and do it. And Banos, that he did that. I mean, he really worked the election. He reminds me of different result, but the race he ran reminds me of Cindy Lerner's race. You know, just checking the boxes, doing what you're supposed to do, being there. And it'll be interesting to see if it has a similar result where Raquel beat Cindy, you know, at the end. I wonder if Kirk, just on personal charisma, can pull that off.
It'll be interesting to watch, that's for sure. But yeah, it's going to be both the commission races, I think, are going to be dog fights from this moment on. And I'm excited.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll see if there's any changes. Thanks for joining us, Elaine.
Thank you.
What do you think are the big,
we need Michael Miller.
These two races going into a runoff. I mean, what do you think is going to be the defining issue of these? Is it still is it still going to be development, and will one of these votes, one of these positions on in the city make the difference over a policy happening or not?
It's interesting you say, because, and being involved in a few of these issues, I mean, there's really three big issues. Miracle Mile, there's the issue, the Miracle Mile redevelopment, there's the Ponce Towers. I don't want to leave that out. There's a huge project on Ponce de Leon, 17-story rental project no one likes. And then you end up with the situation and then you have the Wawa. And those people I'm not used to seeing those. Those are just issue voters. Yeah. It's like, how are you going to help me? And that's be tough. I'm going to step out for a second, and I'm going to bring in Michael Miller. Would you put the results back up so Michael can give us his take on the results that we've gotten in so far?
Good evening. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm glad that you're here. So it's hard to follow with David Winker over here, and I see that. Who do we have over there? Elvis Maldonado from Homestead. Nice to see you. And Tommy, thanks for being here. So let's talk about the results so far. Any surprises?
I mean, I was a bit surprised by Cruz Jimenez not doing better. That's probably the big takeaway.
And she's like disappeared. Sometimes that's a good thing for people to go away so they don't screw it up, all right? But she was really gung-ho for the first month or two, it seems. And for the last month or two, gone. Has she been out there campaigning that you've seen?
Yes, I've seen her out there campaigning and with the family. And Elaine brought up a good point of, would that backfire on her? Which, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, so we look at her father-in-law, who we happened to endorse the last go-around. We happened to like him when he was mayor. And certainly the last year was very tough for him. But remember that if you get him with 50 or 60%, you still have 40 to 50% of the people that can't stand you. And we understand about family connections and about associations with other people. One of the candidates, Javier Banos, was, he was connected to what people say is an unpopular city Miami commissioner, but the reality is he got elected with 50% plus one or more. So even though people were bashing him, all right, they certainly had big supporters. So you have both those things that were going on.
Well, and same race but different person. Valdez Folly, the name recognition didn't carry him over the finish line.
And we know when it's his brother, right? His brother barely won the last two go-arounds.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they've been around Coral Gables politics for generations, all right? So I think that after a while that sort of goes away. And in this case, that's maybe the end of that fiefdom, if you will.
So do you think was an individual problem, or was it the family problem?
I think it was more the family problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from a family, all right? We all come from families.
We all come from a family with problems.
Yes. And so it's like, oh, wait, hold on. What side are you on right now? Right? And we know that when, that Grant leans a little different way than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will go to him when they feel a certain way. And then for me, when they're the other way. So I in this case, in both cases, the family connection did not help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Grant, it's over. We're not running for politics anymore. So let's talk about Mr. Coral Gables. All right. He seems to have really done a good job. I don't think people are surprised because he's pretty popular. Been around Coral Gables for a long time. Nice looking guy. All right. Fit and trim, not like a couple of us in the room here. So he may yet pull it out with Banos. So I don't think anybody's surprised with that.
Mm-hmm.
We've been fortunate to interview a few, or most of the candidates, I suspect at this point. An interesting thing that happened with soon to be, I think, suspect Mayor Lago, is that when he signed that paper, all right,
mm-hmm.
we look at that and we go, well, did he understand it? And how much did it matter? And did he do it for a bigger reason?
Well, and I think I'm interested to get your perspective on how much did it matter, right? Like, I know it got a lot of media attention and attention on Twitter, but when you talk to Coral Gables voters, were they upset about that?
Well, it was sort of like on the Oprah Winfrey interview.
Uh-huh.
So here's this very famous billionaire woman that happens to be Black, that was fighting racism her entire life, that has helped people of every gender, of every color. And she asked the question, oh my goodness, the royal family was wondering what the color the baby would be. Mm-hmm. Well, you can do that without being a racist. You just want to know, what color do you think it would be? No one was surprised except for the person that was leading that charge, all right? Mm-hmm. And so the people that were supportive of that, they didn't have a problem with it, all right? It was the people that didn't like it that spoke loudly. So in this case, it may... we assume that perhaps if it would have been out earlier, it would have made a difference.
Interesting.
But maybe it would not have, because whatever your beliefs are, all right? Like Oprah was saying, I'm surprised that people would think that a white person with a Black baby, with a Black wife, or vice versa, might have a color that we might not expect or suspect. That's an okay question to ask without being considered bad, all right? But people were aghast, all right? I don't think that anybody was aghast, all right? It was only the people that are pushing for folks to stand up for them, and everybody needs that, all right? Mm-hmm. And I believe in that. But the people, his friends, his peers, his voters, all right, that even if they didn't like what he did, that is one thing that he did or didn't do. But for the years of public service, can you do that, all right, and still have some other beliefs, whatever that happened to be? Mm-hmm. So, again, maybe if it was discovered 3 or 4 months ago or 5 months ago, it would have made a difference because it might have given more synergy to the opposition. But at this point, it doesn't look like it matters.
Do people believe he signed it as, hey, I'm signing this paper as mayor candidate, or are you one of the other parents?
And you bring up a really good point. There's things that we will do for our children and our family without regard to whatever the consequences might be over there. Mm-hmm. And imagine saying to your wife, listen, I'm not going to do that. And then you might get hurt from it, but I got to do this because my buddy's over here. Your wife would go, hit the road. And so who knows what he thought might be the reaction, but he did it because he thought it was the best thing for himself and his family and his children. Right? When my daughter was at one of the synagogues, I said to the rabbi, "That doesn't work for me. I don't believe that. I want my daughter not to have that ceiling that's there. All right, it needs to be bigger than that. All right." And I did that with the understanding that he might not have liked it. But we do things, as we know, for our families. And so he stood up for his family. He didn't seem to be concerned when people asked him, "What did you think?" Right? He just said, "Hey, it is what it is. I did it from, I think he said for his daughter. And my hat's off to him. And he was willing to pay a consequence. Whether he knew it was going to be so high or not, I don't know."
Well, and do you think that people saw what, like the Miami Herald switching their endorsement? I mean, do you think that could have actually helped him in the long run?
Well, you bring up a really good point. Other publications have said, when people do that, listen, we endorsed him before, and he needs to improve on this type of thing. We still think he's a good candidate. He should take a look at this item right here, because we don't think that's the right way to go. All right. And there's this cancer culture that is terrible, that if you're not perfect, there's some group that's going to come over and they're going to stop whatever it happens to be. And I think an appropriate response would have been, because I'm sure they're under a bunch of pressure, would again been, he needs to work on that, make it a little bit better. And there were people that were highly against some of the national candidates. They said they need to work on this, they need to work on this, and they need to work on this. And if they can work on that, they'll be okay.
Well, and it's interesting because I do think that there's a large segment of the population who that is an important issue, right? Like they were upset about the letter and does think that was inappropriate for the letter to be sent, period, let alone have a candidate sign on to it. What we found out is that's not exactly a attitude that is the voting majority in Coral Gables.
Right. And that's one of the challenges that we have in life. We have people on the right and left and the center, and they believe a whole bunch of things, and there's a place for all of us. And right now I see my place is not here anymore.
No,
so David,
we're gonna kick Phil out.
I'm out
with you.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna kick. No, you stay there. Oh yeah,
Okay.
let me switch with you. You swing over here. That's not good radio switching on the thing, but we're gonna bring up the final results.
Results are in.
We're bringing Elaine up. Elaine, there was over 10,000 votes cast. Look at the numbers. You got them up in front of you, Elaine? We can't hear you. Hang on. Oh, no, it's our fault. We got you.
Yeah,
Hey,
I got
Elaine.
them up in front of me. Yeah, 10,000, at least 10,000, and it drops off in the commission races, but 10,300 and some votes in the mayor's race. Yeah.
So it was a good. I mean, that's a little higher than Ariel predicted, and so we have a mayor-elect.
We do. I don't think that there's any way that this can be. I mean, is this everybody? Is this the total?
23 of 24.
Okay, yeah, there's no way that anybody can make up that difference, and so we have a mayor-elect. I'm
hold on.
not.
Hold on.
Right.
See ya?
I can't see it, but
So-
what is the result there?
So 23 of 24 precincts
Okay.
done. We got 10,000 votes, and so we got Vince Lago at 57%. And then the other races hold. Rhonda at 42%, almost double Jose Valdez-Fowley. It's interesting because if you add up, she's right there. She came close to winning it outright. And then in the other race, so then you got Tanya came in third place with 13%. Then you have in the Group 3 race, neck and neck, Banos with 31.93 and Kirk with 30.74.
Guess who got 100%? Yours truly.
You did. That's why I brought you back in. You nailed every race.
Darn. All right. Son of a gun.
Say whatever you want.
That Starbucks coffee.
Say whatever you want about community newspapers, the hub of local news.
That's it.
He nailed it. And I do want to tell you something, Elaine, before we let you go so you can go do your thing. It's interesting because you wrote a column that you got some pushback on about I know there was pressure or people reached out to community newspapers. Are you going to revoke? Are you going to do whatever? You guys didn't do any, you let it sit. Elaine actually wrote an article explaining why she did not pull her endorsement. I mean, not your endorsement, really, but yeah, it was your
My
endorsement.
recommendation.
Your recommendation.
My support from Vince. Yeah. No, I didn't think, I am concerned about the letter. I do think that the letter is inappropriate. I do believe that I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic high school. I believe there is room for education on marginalized communities and discrimination and systemic racism. I think that it was wrong for many reasons, but I don't think it's a reason not to elect him mayor. It has nothing to do with his track record as a public servant, which I think has come out, in the votes today. Vince Lago is perhaps the hardest public servant I have ever met in more than 2 decades of covering local government. He has open open office hours like a professor. He responds to emails and text messages and phone calls right away, not days later. He's very accessible. He's transparent. He tells you as it is when he's going to support something or not, which I think is why people are complaining that he got a lot of developer and lobbyist money, but you don't understand the value that has to a developer or lobbyist, having someone who's going to tell you straight out, I'm not going to vote for your project, because then they know they have to concentrate on the other 4 votes or change the project in order to get your vote, your convinced vote. So, I mean, I think that this is a mandate for Vince. I think it obviously shows that he has the support of the community, and I'm very happy for him. I think he's going to be a great mayor for the city of Coral Gables.
I have to do Dr. Cantor, who's involved with the project, corrected me that Kirk Menendez was at the debate put on by the Carver PTA, and he is against the Wawa. So that's a big correction there. What are your predictions for that race, Elaine, with Kirk running against Banos?
I'm gonna say that I think Kirk is gonna, pull it out. I think like we call him Mr. Coral Gables, right? And I think that he's gotten a lot of momentum in the last couple of weeks. Alex Pizzello is a better finance candidate, and he beat him. So I think that if he keeps this momentum up, he can beat Banos. Banos has a good message and on pension reform. And Kirk just needs to develop a good message and a good narrative in the next couple of weeks.
Elaine,
Awesome.
I want to thank you for your service to Miami-Dade County for many, 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 many years. It's been too long since I've seen you in person, and I think the last time was on a Friends on Bayshore Drive. I don't know when we all had colored hair.
Pre-COVID, exactly.
That's it.
Pre-COVID.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate it. We'll be fact checker or Phil. The next election is what, the 23rd? The runoff?
27th.
The 27th. Do you think that this whole early voting thing was a success, Elaine? First, I didn't realize it was the first time. Ariel said the first time we've done early voting.
Yeah, I mean, the first time we've done early voting in Coral Gables for municipal elections, and they only got 2 days, and they got more than 2,000 votes in those days between the absentee ballots that were dropped off and the people who went in and early voted at the library. I think that if they had expanded it, they would have done more. So yeah, no, I think this absolutely shows that early voting works in Coral Gables.
What do we got next? We got Sweetwater.
We have Sweetwater in May. And then I think we have a little bit of a lull before we have the big 5 this year: Miami Gardens, Miami Beach, Miami, Homestead, and Hialeah. Those are the big 5.
Homestead, go Homestead.
Sitting in the room with us is Elvis Maldonado.
Be careful what you say. He's listening.
And I can tell you, everyone's already gearing up for the Homestead election. So yeah, it's interesting. The cycle never dies down.
Ain't it great?
I know.
We love it.
It is.
Thank you so much, Elaine. We'll be looking forward to seeing your calls.
Elaine.
Thanks for having me. All right. Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye. Well, give me some last thoughts. You for someone who nailed every single race.
It was just dumb intuition. We were all glad when November came, and then when January came, and then when February came, and then we had this little lull the past 2 months. All right. But I can't wait. I can't wait for the next 5, because we're going to have a blast.
It's going to be a blast. And Phil, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. We'll bring
Thanks.
Phil in just for one more minute. We'll thank you, Michael, for making all this possible. We're here at the Miami Community Newspapers
And home
studio.
of the mainland Marlins every day, right here with Tommy Stitt and David Winker.
As you walk in.
These sportsmen.
Go Dolphins!
All right, I think is that it?
No, he's gonna bring. We're bringing Phil.
Okay, there you go.
We're kicking you out of here. Phil, what do you think?
It's a good local race.
Good local race.
People cared about the people who needed to cared, and good turnout, good issues.
And we're going to be right back at it. A couple big elections coming up, and I think I wonder on a macro level if we're seeing. I think maybe one of the things we're seeing with COVID is how local politics affect our lives.
100%. I mean, gosh, people knew who the mayor was, and if they had a mask mandate, and if they had a curfew, and when it was going to stop, and when it was going to start.
Well, let me tell you something, and then last thing I'll say about that is this idea of, I can't remember a crisis in America where it more depended where you were geographically. Your experience, if you were in Florida, was very different than the experience in New York,
100%.
very different than California. I was in California for spring break. And California, the kids were just going back to school. The restaurants are closed. It's all takeout. Much more of a lockdown environment. Florida, I don't really know if we ever had a coherent policy, but it seems like it's all kind of worked out well. Florida stayed open for business. And it was interesting. One thing we haven't had a chance to talk about, I was in Texas, and, there was a lot of talk about how Texas had gone, they pulled the mask mandate.
Well, Texas has a rough month with COVID and the power outages. So,
but they pulled the thing. But then when I was there, everywhere I went in Houston said per order of Judge so and so.
Yeah.
We were all wearing masks. I mean, for spring break, we was there last week, whatever.
Austin, where I used to work, kept their mask mandate. The state of Texas sued them, and the city of Austin won. They said no. We in the home rule state.
That must have been why the home rule state. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not just what's so interesting. I think also it's not just which state you're in, but your personal position. I think this pandemic really has uncovered a lot of the inequalities, right? Like one person's experience of COVID could be vastly different from another person as experiencing COVID when it comes to where they work, what they do for a living.
Do you work for the cruise industry, or do you work for what's a good example of something that's just been stayed wide open? There's a lot of businesses. Me as a lawyer, I'm busier than ever.
How many kids you have, and
right? Yeah, how homeschooling's gone.
Yeah. And all of those policies are everything that affects those has a huge impact, or should I say, your local government has a huge impact on all of those aspects of life, whether your school's open, which businesses are open. So it's go vote.
It'll be
they
interesting.
Really are important.
And Elaine, I still, I see Elaine listening, and it's interesting, Elaine, to think of, like, I don't think of Kirk Menendez being a traditional candidate. Javier Baños in some ways is not a traditional candidate. He's an like CPA.
Well, sometimes you need a COVID kind of tipping point to say, I got, to get the normal people to say, I got to get in there and bring this perspective instead of the people who always run all the time. I mean, like Mr. Miller was saying, there's the Valdez Volley kind of weight, if you will, right? People wanted to move on from that name.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Tommy, thank you for you deserve a beer. I know you've had a long day. I really appreciate it. Tune in to Mainline Marlins, Tommy and I's Marlin Show, number 69 in Sports News Podcast.
Really?
We're gonna have t-shirts with 69 in the back, and you can explain why it's 69, 69th ranked show.
Okay. Well, what if you change? What if you go?
Oh no, we're happy with 69. we will we appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Have a happy end of election day.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you.